25 minutes. That's all it took to erase Russia's most feared tank army from existence. 7 kilometers of steel, 90 modern tanks, 50 armored vehicles, thousands of men vanished in smoke and fire. What should have been a crushing victory turned into a nightmare that Moscow never saw coming. At 4:30 a.m., the Serpent of Steel began to move. Backed by electronic warfare, mobile air defenses, and sheer firepower, it looked unstoppable. But Ukraine had laid a trap. Invisible eyes in the sky, swarms of drones, and hunters on dirt bikes waiting for the kill. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution. And here's my question for you. If you were the commander that night, what would you have struck first, the jammers, the fuel trucks, or the tanks themselves? Comment below, because the answer could mean life or death. 4:30 a.m. The sky above Donbass was a faint shade of steel blue, the last veil before sunrise. Along the T-518 highway, a column 7 kilometers long moved like a living creature of iron and fire. 90 Russian main battle tanks, 60 T-90M Pro-Rev, and 30 turbine-screaming T-80 BVMs rolled forward in tight formation. Their engines pumped out a constant river of smoke, a stench of diesel that clung to the damp morning air. Behind them, 50 armored fighting vehicles rumbled in step. BMP-3 it was the herald of vengeance. 120 Lyudy FPV drones, each worth barely $1,500, surged into the air. Each carried a PG-7 VR tandem charge warhead, a shaped explosive designed to punch through reactive armor. On paper, these were toys compared to a $4.5 million T-90M. But in war, paper means nothing. The Russian column erupted in panic. BMP-3 seconds and BMP-T Terminators opened fire with their 30mm cannons. Heavy machine guns stitched the sky with tracers. But the drones were too many, too fast, and too determined. Ukrainian operators wearing video goggles guided them with surgical precision, seeing the battlefield in grainy first-person view. They didn't go for the tanks. Not yet. Your next move be? Would you strike the command vehicles to sever control, or lay mines ahead to trap the beast? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious what you would choose. Because at 5:30, the real trap was about to tighten, and what happened next turned panic into pure chaos. 5:30 a.m. The Serpent was slowing. With its air defenses torn apart, its radio, the drones screamed into their targets. Operators on the ground saw bolts and weld seams grow larger on their screens before static consumed everything. Each impact severed another nerve in the Russian brain. By 5:40, at least 6 command vehicles had been annihilated, representing nearly 40% of the column's coordination capacity. Officers screamed into dead microphones. Platoons waited for orders that never came. The head of the Serpent no longer knew where to strike. That was the moment the sky changed again. Slow hulking shapes rose into the dawn, 30 agricultural hexacopters, nicknamed Baba Yaga by the troops. Normally they sprayed fields. Now they carried death. Heavy TM-62 anti-tank mines, each weighing nearly 10 kilograms. The sound was different from the buzzing hornets.
The brain of the column
it was
dark.
Lower, more ominous. A mechanical growl that echoed across the fields. Russian tank crews, hatches slammed shut, could only hear it above them, unable to look without exposing themselves. The Baba Yagas flew not at the tanks, but 2 kilometers ahead. One after another, they released their payloads. Circular mines tumbled down like iron raindrops, clattering onto the asphalt. In less than 3 minutes, a stretch of road that had been clear became an instant minefield. But war is friction. A Tor M2 crew, operating in manual mode, spotted one of the lumbering drones. A missile lanced upward, and the Baba Yaga exploded, scattering its 6 mines harmlessly into the fields. A gap appeared narrow, but enough for a T-90 to push through. The Ukrainian commander knew the entire ambush hinged on closing that hole. He called to his best operator, call sign Kropiva. The young man didn't answer. He was already strapping a TM-62 under a battered recon drone with duct tape and zip ties. At 5:45, the wobbling machine took flight. 6 a.m. The Serpent of Steel was trapped. The lead T-90 lay crippled on its side, tracks blown apart by the mine. Behind it, a traffic jam rippled backward for kilometers. Dozens of tanks and armored vehicles stalled nose to tail, engines idling, exhaust fumes thick in the morning mist. For a moment the battlefield went silent, as if the column was holding its breath. And then the wolves came. From the tree lines on both flanks, the growl of 2-stroke engines shattered the dawn. 150 Ukrainian Special Forces soldiers burst into view, riding lightweight KTM enduro bikes painted in camouflage. They operated in hunter-killer packs of 3. A driver, a gunner, and a spotter. Fast, agile, and nearly impossible to hit, they swarmed toward the column like predators scenting blood. A team designated Nomad 3 hurtled toward a T-90M. The gunner, clinging to the back seat, hefted a FGM-148 Javelin launcher. "Lock!" he screamed into the radio, but the seeker struggled through the diesel haze. ABTR 82 Amperes spotted them and opened fire, stitching bullets across the dirt. The driver swerved violently, mud spraying, inches from death. At the last moment, the spotter fired a single RPG-26 into the T-90's rear deck. The small warhead did little damage, but it burned bright enough for the Javelin to seize a heat lock. "Yak!" the gunner roared. He pulled the trigger. The missile arced upward, then plunged straight down. The impact was apocalyptic. The tank's turret, over 15 tons of steel, launched 30 feet into the air, spinning like a coin before crashing down in flames. And this was only the beginning. Other teams fired NLAWs and AT-4 seconds at BMPs from under one jamming bubble nearly 300 kilometers wide. Its operators felt untouchable, confident that no drone, no signal, no guided munition could penetrate their shield. High above, at 12,000 meters altitude, a solitary Ukrainian Leleka 100 reconnaissance drone circled, silent as a ghost. It wasn't looking at the tanks. It was hunting for the source of the jamming itself. A spike of energy glowed across its sensors like a beacon in the dark. The coordinates were locked. 70 kilometers away, a HIMARS crew received the encrypted burst. An M31 guided rocket, worth $168,000, was armed and launched. At 3 times the speed of sound, it arced upward into the stratosphere. The Russians never saw it coming. The trap had been sprung. 5 a.m. The silence after the explosion was eerie. The Krasuka 4 was gone, vaporized in a white flash that tore through its armored hull. For the Russian crews, confidence drained in an instant, their radios filled with static, their screens blank. For the Ukrainian command, it was the moment they had been waiting for. The shield was down. The skies were open. From hidden fields and barns along the Verivka salient, a new sound rose. At first it was a low storm. For the Russians, it was their ace in the hole. For Ukraine, it was the apocalypse waiting to be unleashed. Through the mist, its launcher arms began to elevate. The crew was desperate, frantic, trying to bring its devastating payload to bear. If even a single salvo fired, the Ukrainian assault teams clustered in the tree lines could be annihilated in seconds. The battlefield seemed to freeze, every engine roar and burst of gunfire drowned out by the looming terror of those rockets. But the Ukrainians were watching. A spotter from Nomad 7, crouched behind the smoking carcass of a BMP, whispered coordinates. 2 separate Javelin teams locked on from different angles, their gunners trembling with adrenaline. "Firing!" came the cry. 2 missiles streaked skyward, curving down in deadly arcs. The first hit the turret's roof, the second struck the side plating. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. And then the world ignited. The Buratino didn't explode, it detonated into a miniature sundae. 24 thermobaric rockets went up at once, creating a fireball that vaporized everything within a 100-meter radius. Steel was reduced to molten spray, asphalt cracked and bubbled like lava. The shockwave rattled windows in villages 5 kilometers away. For those caught nearby, there was no escape. By 6:45, the center of the Russian formation was gone. Vehicles flipped like toys, crews torn apart in the blast. Survivors stumbled from their wrecks, ears bleeding, eyes wide with terror. The psychological collapse was as devastating as the physical one. The mighty Serpent was broken, its spine shattered by its own most fearsome weapon. But the battle wasn't over. Flames still roared, and the Ukrainian jackals were circling back. The slaughter would only deepen in the minutes to come. 7 a.m. The sun finally broke over Donbass, casting a pale light on a scene of ruin. The T-518 highway, once a proud artery of Russia's advance, was now a graveyard of steel. For 7 kilometers, burned-out hulks of T-90 MiZ, BMP 3 seconds, and BMP-T Terminators lay twisted and blackened. Smoke rose in heavy columns, mixing with the acrid stench of diesel and scorched metal. In less than 30 minutes, the 1st Guards Tank Army's spearhead had ceased to exist. Out of 90 tanks, its enemy, the Serpent, was dead. The black earth of Donbass had claimed it, and the world would not forget what had risen in its place. The battle on the T-518 highway was more than a clash of steel, it was a revelation. In less than half an hour, an armored spearhead that once embodied Russian pride had been shattered by a swarm of cheap drones, daring riders on dirt bikes, and the courage of soldiers who refused to bow. It was proof that the future of war belongs not to sheer mass, but to speed, innovation, and the will to adapt. But behind the wreckage lies the human cost. 9 Ukrainian fighters never returned. Their sacrifice reminds us that even the most brilliant victories are written in blood. The Serpent of Steel lies broken in the black earth, but its lesson will echo for decades. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe this kind of asymmetric strategy will define the wars of tomorrow? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more.